Hi there, Linda Behrens here. Today we're going to take a look at the designer theorizer pattern, also known as INTP in the type world. This holistic pattern will give us some idea of the overall theme of the pattern, and then we'll take a look at this 3D approach to understanding each of the 16 personality types, and in this case, the designer theorizer. So just a reminder that to fully understand a living system, we need to look holistically at patterns. And patterns are not just adding up a bunch of parts, but they're a configuration or an arrangement of certain characteristics. So we're going to look at the designer theorizer through several different lenses: the interaction styles lens, the essential motivators lens, and the intentional drivers lens. And we're going to start by looking at the themes of each one and the theme of the whole type pattern, because this is one of the most fundamental ways for us to take a look at and really understand what each of these 16 personality types looks like. So designer theorizer. These qualities are some qualities that Dario Nardi and I developed, just short, brief little snapshots or themes. And I have found them so helpful in helping people understand very quickly what that pattern is about. So for designer theorizer, becoming an expert is a driving force. Seeing new patterns and elegant connections. Now, elegance important. Talent for design and redesign, crossing the artificial boundaries of thought, activating the imagination, clarifying and defining, making discoveries, reflecting on the process of thinking itself, detaching to analyze, struggle with attending to the physical world. So this is the overall theme of the designer theorizer pattern. So now let's take a look through the theorist lens, the essential motivator lens that tells us what are the main drivers of this personality pattern. Theorist, the core psychological needs are mastery and self-control. And knowledge and competence. Now, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to have at least some knowledge and be competent at something. But for the theorist, this is a core psychological need. If this need is not met, it can become extremely stressful. The core values related to that are progress and improvement. So that has a lot to do with being knowledgeable and mastery over something and improving something, whether it's yourself or a system or a process or someone else's life. Logical consistency, constantly looking for things to be logically consistent. And if they're not logically consistent, if they don't fit, then there's quite a chance that someone with this pattern is likely to reject whatever is proposed. There's a constant search for the ultimate truth and theories, sort of the operating principles of the universe, if you will. And having expertise themselves and actually fully enjoying expert relationships. So there's something really important for a theorist to have, a sense of sharing expertise. This is my pattern, so I'll share a few stories. It's also the pattern of my husband. For this variety of theorists anyway, for me, most of my colleagues and friends come through this medium of sharing sharing some expertise, of having some sort of engagement around whatever we are expert in. So we're sharing knowledge, talking about things, refining those theories, et cetera, et cetera. The talents for the theorist are strategy, differential thinking, and theorizing and troubleshooting. So the strategy is, it's not there, a couple of ways to look at strategy. It's a commonly used word in the business world. It can be having a vision of where to go and then seeing how things are going to lay out. But for the designer theorizer, strategy is more about having a sense of whether things are going to work and what might not work, and looking for previously unthought of, becoming aware of unthought of things that aren't going to work. And so the strategy is a constant checking to see if the way we're going is really on track with what the goal is. Theorizing, it's just impossible almost to not theorize. And tending to troubleshoot, kind of interestingly, to figure out things that can be fixed. How do you fix something? I think this was my father's pattern, and he was constantly, his business was fixing things. In a small town in Kansas, his opportunities were more around actually fixing equipment, but really understanding how things work so that you can figure out how to fix it. The behaviors that you might see are, I like to talk about this time orientation. For the theorist, there's an orientation toward something that's infinite, the past, the present, and the future, and kind of tuning into how all of these different time frames can interrelate. Another frequent behavior is critiquing. It's often misunderstood. The way you can improve things is to critique something. And if you notice what isn't working, what isn't quite lined up, that can be a gift to someone. Most of the time, it's seen as being critical if people aren't really aware and make space for the theorist to do such a thing, to add that contribution. The language tends to be fairly precise. So if things are not precise, very often someone with a theorist pattern will question and ask questions and find out about, what did you really mean? They might also critique the word choice. That can be kind of a game for them. It's kind of enjoyable, and they not realize that others aren't enjoying that. And the primary attitude is one of skepticism, and that is because there's always another way to see something. So not taking things on faith just because, they're likely to be skeptical until they see a fair amount of solid reasoning or solid evidence. And overall, their demeanor is composed. So kind of calm in a way. I used to call this calm, and one of my colleagues said, no, I don't really feel calm inside. But so it's really about having this composed presence to problem solve. And so sometimes that's kind of how they bring the best to the party. So the designer theorizer embodies and practices these things. And these are the kinds of things that they need to be psychologically alive. Now, what else? Well, behind the scenes, this is the interaction style, because we're looking at how we interact. And so for the designer theorizer, this kind of comes out in a quiet way, in a behind the scenes way. You might not see much going on for a while. The core drives are that pressing need to integrate, to get bits and pieces of information that all line up, especially in the case of the designer theorizer. They want it all lined up, and to integrate what fits and what doesn't fit, well, put it aside. And the core belief that goes with this is that it's worth the time to integrate and reconcile many inputs. And so when they're interacting with others, they may be calm, quiet, reflective. They might wind up being questioning to get more information. Sometimes it's saying nothing because they're absorbing all of this. The aim of all of this effort here, which may not look like effort, it may look like doing nothing, is to get the best result possible. And it's really worth it to put in that time to get that best result possible, according to the designer theorizer and the behind the scenes. So the talents that go with behind the scenes are synthesizing, pulling things together, making sure that they work together, much like a synthesizer would do in the field of music. Reconciling inconsistencies. Well, if it doesn't quite fit, what's making it inconsistent? What do we need to do with it? And this is especially true for the designer theorizer. And searching for commonalities, how things are alike. The behaviors tend to be agreeable. Interestingly, for the designer theorizer pattern, we see agreeable behaviors and critiquing behaviors. So that can be kind of a shock when you start off with agreeableness and then you then suddenly feel like you've been critiqued. But it's just as it all sort of comes together, sitting back, now you have a question. Okay. The behavior also tends to be fairly accommodating. You can't really integrate all of this stuff without going along with things for a while until they no longer fit. And they tend to be, people with this pattern tend to be fairly patient while they're absorbing all of this information. And when it comes time to have a relationship, because this is about communication and relationships in terms of interaction style, they may be a little bit slow to jump on straight into that interaction style. I mean, interacting with others. Okay, so what about the intentional drivers? Now, this is a new lens. The book isn't ready yet, but we're working on it. It's been around for quite a while. So one of the things that it rings true for the designer theorizer is this idea of enhancing, that there's a quest to enhance and improve upon the system or the application for a better experience. And so this is something that the designer theorizer has a tendency to do. In a way, it might be fixing things that don't seem broken, or that there's kind of this need to really enhance it, make it a little better. All kinds of ways that could happen for the designer theorizer. It might be in the form of purifying the models and frameworks that they're likely to use. And what they want is refined outcomes. They want accuracy and wholeness. So this enhancing is all about getting these refined outcomes in service of accuracy and wholeness. Okay, so those are the three main patterned lenses that we can take a look at. And each lens brings a different kind of information. Now, we can also take a look at the Jungian view of the designer theorizer and look at cognitive dynamics. Now, the dynamics are the way the different mental processes or functions play out in this particular personality pattern. And so for the designer theorizer, the leading role is analyzing, constantly taking things in, checking them against what's known, what models you have, what frameworks, building a framework, identifying a new framework, but constantly analyzing. And that kind of makes sense in the way that we're going around fixing things. As a little girl, I would always ask my dad, I would go with him on repair jobs out into the country. He was an appliance service and repair person, also with INTP preferences, I think. Anyway, I would ask him, well, Daddy, why are you doing that? How does this work? And I got very angry when tape recorders first came out, and I wanted to know how they worked. And that's not telling you how old I am. But at any rate, I was really frustrated that he couldn't tell me, because I really, really wanted to know. So constantly analyzing, trying to figure things out. The supporting role in this pattern is interpreting. So seeing patterns and connections through extroverted intuiting, noticing that there are these connections, and you can see how this feeds the designing aspect of the theorizer pattern, because it enables you to see a connection that maybe somebody else didn't see, and you can create a new understanding or some new connection. And the relief role is reviewing. So I like to think, I like, this is John Beebe's model about the patterns. And to me, this relief role is often a place where we play. So for this designer theorizer, especially a little more into adulthood and later in life, and I'm definitely later in life, a lot of reviewing happens. So it's about going through going through things and kind of reliving them and playing with them. So the relief role is kind of this forever child where we play. And for me, it shows up in to giving people way more details than they wanted to know. And so in the interest of brevity, I'm going to stop at that. So anyway, and then on the spine of the personality is the connecting extroverted feeling. So there is often this desire somewhere, well, I think it's there throughout life, but in the background, somewhere it moves a little more forward in our awareness to more consciously say things and do things that will connect with others and to attend to other people's needs. So this connecting and analyzing is that axis of our personality, the spine of the personality. So these are the primary processes that are there for INTP. And it's here that we see some connectedness, some similarity with the ISTP analyzer operator pattern because of the analyzing and the connecting. And so you will see sometimes some type confusion or what I call lookalikes between these two. And they both tend to be pragmatic and wanting to call the shots on their own actions, which goes with improviser and theorist, by the way. Okay, so this is that spine of the personality really relating to the ISTP description. And yeah, so let's look at these shadow processes, things that are there that we can call on when we need them. And sometimes they develop a fair amount. It's not necessarily that we would be inclined to develop these the way we are our primary processes, but they are there and they do show up. So what shows up in this opposing role, as John Beebe called it, the way we get oppositional for designer theorizer is segmenting, breaking things down, putting structure on the external world, and sort of, let's have some rules about this, right? Let's follow the rules, let's follow the structure, let's get the order straight. That might be the order straight in an outline. I've been doing some editing for someone and it's like, no, wait a minute, this is out of sequence, right? So you can notice that. And this is often can play a support role for the designer theorizer. And sometimes it can be a very way that we get stubborn by insisting on the rules that we have seen set up. I'm told that that shows up for me in terms of the processes that we teach people and how I think they should follow those processes. The critical parent role is foreseeing. So this is where we tend to be critical of ourselves. And for this, in this case, it's the introverted intuiting. So for someone with designer theorizer, we tend not to trust the images we have about the future. And that's just me, sorry, personalize this. But it's and that sometimes you can get a powerful image of where things are going to go that will be how it goes. Sometimes it can be just, you know, a symbol that shows up that's very powerful. Sometimes it's a sense, but very often there's an anticipation about things will go wrong from this critical parent role, which doesn't usually how introverted intuiting works. Deceiving role is experiencing. So it's about getting caught up in the activities of the moment, where experiencing is feeling extroverted sensing fully present and noticing what's going on out there. In the deceiving role, it can be something irrelevant or even detrimental that will catch you. And you will just get caught up in the moment of that. The easy way for me to describe that is see it, like it, buy it, or see it, like it, eat it. So kind of getting involved and not having much control over when it has you, and you instead of you having it. So getting involved in those experiences. And then we have what we call the devilish role, which is valuing what's important, introverted feeling. So for the designer theorizer, that sense of this is really important. We really have to do this. I really have to do this. That kind of feeds into the see it, like it, buy it as well. Sometimes something can move to the surface for the designer theorizer and be really very important. And it may be very important. It doesn't mean that it's always in that negative way. So it can play a positive role as well as the devilish, but sometimes in a shadowy way, we get caught up in it. So now we've looked at the designer theorizer in all of these, through all of these different lenses. And it can help you cross-check when you're finding the look-alike. So sometimes the designer theorizer will look like someone, someone with INFP preferences, for example, because of the partly behind the scenes, sharing that. So you can use this three-dimensional model to start to see and do some triage, if you will, figuring out what your best fit is, or helping someone else. And always recognize that if you haven't really had it fit through all of these lenses, it might not be the right fit. So thank you for joining me.